Welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Udan. For the better part of last week, Nigeria and some other African countries converged on London for the first ever UK-Africa Investment Summit to chart the workable partnership for development. President Muhammadu Buhari led Nigeria's delegation to the summit, where new perspectives on Africa's development were discussed, particularly on partnership for prosperity. Deliberations at the summit centered on issues that include more investments and jobs, sustainable finance and infrastructure, clean energy and trade. Already, Nigeria and the United Kingdom have resolved to increase the level of economic cooperation as Britain exits the European Union. As a fallout of the summit, the British government had announced new initiatives worth over £1.5 billion expected to massively create jobs opportunities across Africa. Furthermore, the United Kingdom has offered to mobilize private investment valued at over £2.4 billion for African countries. Development applauded, yes, seen as a double for Nigeria, especially with other gains, derivable gains from the 50th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. What are other areas of win-win to grow the nation's economy? How soon will the gains materialize? Are there envisaged challenges? Answers and more after this background report put together by Benny Adams.
At the sidelines of the just concluded UK-Africa Summit, President Muhammadu Buhari lobbied the British community to invest in the Nigerian economy. That made an immediate impact as 4 British companies signed business deals worth £153.4 billion to invest in Nigeria. The Low Energy Designs won an export contract to install street lighting in Oyo State. The Savannah will invest £315 million in the acquisition and investment of in-gas assets in Nigeria. Tex ATC is to install 5 airport control room towers worth £2 million in different parts of Nigeria, while Trilliant got a deal to install £5 million of smart metering for Abuja Discos. Several other deals were signed during the summit, with African and UK businesses committing investments expected to reach billions.
There's been quite a lot of focus on Nigeria, and I think there's a realization that Nigeria is very much a market and a people that it's worth engaging with. And of course, we hope to see this translated into concrete investment.
We are likely now to begin to see a re-engagement that will be beneficial not only for the many African economies, but also for the UK. It means that Nigeria will have a head start in any rebuilding of business and investment relations with the UK. Nigeria can lead the way for other African countries to follow.
Then came the commitment by the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and Secretary of State for International Trade.
Africa is the future, and the UK has a huge and active role to play in that future. We want to be with you side by side every step of the way. So let's seize the opportunities that are before us here today. Let's build the partnership for the future. And together, let us write the next chapter for my country, for your country, and above all, for all the peoples.
As we get Brexit done, we want a closer trading partnership with African nations. Today, CDC has agreed new investments worth £300 million and are committed to invest a further £2 billion in Africa over the next 2 years. And what makes the UK different is our recognition that this huge investment needs to be felt by local communities across the whole of Africa.
This development has elicited reactions from individuals in government and the business community back home.
Nigeria, of course, being the largest in Africa, is as the bigger future. So what we need to do is, everybody now wants to invest in Africa, but we determine, what happens with that. And so, and everybody knows, the smart person knows that this is the place to invest in. But for us, with Nigerians in the diaspora, your people should be your first line of contact. So when we talk of foreign direct investment, we have Nigerians in the diaspora that are already coming back to invest in their country, especially in areas of agriculture, ICT, hospitals, education, restaurants. They are coming back and they are investing in their country. So that is very critical to us.
When the FBI, for example, or the Scotland Yard are telling somebody or investigating somebody, they could actually do that for 4 or 5 years without you knowing that you're under their radar.
Yeah.
And when they nail you and take you to court, there is absolutely no dispute.
The evidence is there.
The reference is there. And, so if they can help us build the capacity, and put in place certain laws that will enable us fight corruption to its logical conclusion.
Guests on Tuesday Live tonight will x-ray this new partnership, its benefits and challenges as the UK expands business frontiers after Brexit.
Fallout of UK Africa Investment Summit, and along the program we shall be looking at the just concluded 2020 World Economic Summit in Davos, Switzerland. Well, that's the focus and that background that sets the tone for the program tonight. As usual, at some time our lines will be open. You put your phone calls through, and when doing this, turn down the volume of your television set to avoid the hallback. Also, our Twitter handle is open at Tuesday Live NTA. Send in your tweets, questions, concerns, and your line of thoughts, and our team of guests will be here to address them. Tonight, I have Ajuri Ngalale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Always a pleasure to have you on the program.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Emeka Okengu, Development Economist and former World Bank Consultant. It's good to have you.
Pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
Ken Okora is expert on regional economic integration, trade lawyer, ECOWAS consultant, and President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Welcome to Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you very much.
From our Kano studios, we have Professor Garba Shekhar of the Department of Economics, Bayero University, Kano. Good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, good to go. At the beginning, the build-up to this summit, there have been reactions, positive, negative. But from what we have heard across board, let me start with a jury. What would have informed this, and why now?
Well, thank you very much for that question. This is a very unique period in world history, where we are beginning to see a rise in nationalism in countries. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with the fallout of some of the migration crises that we've seen across Europe. And we've now seen how that had impacted the vote in the UK, in Great Britain, to eventually come out of the European Union, or out of the partnership with the European Union, known as Brexit. So that's the backdrop. And so now that you have this kind of these trends globally, the question now is about how do you open up trade and investment opportunities with markets that previously were untapped in terms of bilateral relationships. At least that's from the perspective of the United Kingdom. Now, from the perspective of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we're also at a unique point in history where you have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement being, very close now to implementation. Over $1 trillion expected to filter into the African continent. And obviously, people are looking at the markets and they're saying, okay, which markets are as we kind of come together. What markets can we really tap into, number one? Number two, which countries are those countries that have the kind of infrastructure, the kind of logistics, the nature of the people that would facilitate economic growth or company growth, organizational growth as we choose to invest. And I think those decisions are being made abroad right now, but locally, obviously in the African continent, there's now a battle between countries to say, look, this is the place to invest. And fortunately for us, we have a president and President Muhammadu Buhari who understands the moment, who appreciates the trends that are taking place around the world, and is now effectively preparing Nigeria to take full advantage of the opportunities that are coming up. And I want to be very precise on what I'm talking about when I say that Mr. President is preparing the country to take full advantage of some of these opportunities. Obviously, the focus being on the UK-Africa Summit, we know that certain immediate deals were struck. Obviously, Trilliant, a UK-based firm that's going to be dealing in smart metering in Abuja. Obviously, Savannah Energy with a £315 million investment in Nigerian oil and gas assets, which I'm sure would ramp up over a period of time as those assets are developed. And then obviously the mention of Tex ATC with a multi-million-pound agreement to build control towers around the country, or at least, yes, around the country. But I think what's important is Mr. President is taking the long view. He's not just looking at what Nigeria can gain immediately. In 2015, Mr. President was made the head of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, which essentially is tasked with facilitating trade and investment within the Commonwealth of Nations. Obviously, that's Great Britain, Australia, Canada, Nigeria, and so many other countries. Now, the opportunity presented by Brexit is the fact that now you have an end to the kind of economic ring fencing that we had seen before, where essentially because of the partnership between Great Britain and the European Union, Great Britain was limited in terms of the extent to which it can facilitate trade and investment with countries that are outside of the European bloc. That is no longer an encumbrance. Mr. President sees that, and obviously he's now ramping up, and he said it in his remarks when he was in the UK, that this is now the time for us to add fresh life and energy to the workings of the Commonwealth of Nations in terms of facilitating trade and investment between the countries. And I think the fact that all of the Commonwealth countries are obviously aligned, their laws are aligned to English jurisprudence, it obviously enables countries like Nigeria and the other Commonwealth countries to effectively synergize their laws and their regulations to further enhance and expedite trade and investment within that bloc. So I think when you look at the totality of what Mr. President was able to achieve in the UK and Africa, it's obviously just one more step in the larger Nigeria first foreign policy that we've seen Mr. President embark on. We've seen him strike deals in Russia. We've seen him strike deals with Germany in terms of the Siemens deal for power supply. We've seen him strike deals with Brazil with the agricultural mechanization program. The list goes on and on and on. And he's not just limiting that kind of investment pursuit to other countries. He's also dealing directly with international companies across sectors to come and invest in the country. So I think on the whole, Nigerians have a lot to be optimistic about, and certainly Mr. President has shown that he's a leader that's finally going to bring us the investments that will create the jobs that will bring us the kind of sustainable developing economy we've all been looking for.
Okay. One worry about all this, about looking at the bigger picture, some feel that this is one way and dark scramble for Africa. And the view is Africa is not what it used to be. Now, let me take this. In trying to get some line of thought on this, a scholar said enormous human and natural resources has been devastated by serious political and economic contradictions in Africa. So coming back to Africa, you need to bend back and look deeply. Secondly, says the conventional wisdom in analyzing African politics is to see Africa, or African politics and economics, is to see Africa as made up of over 2,000 tribes and ethnicities, hostile to one another. Looking at what is the central picture, given this scenario printed, What's your...
You see, what you painted can also fit into the people you think are the traducers of Africa. Okay, it's important to look at what's happening from what you might be able to call the rise and fall of states. It's very, very important. And sometimes when we denigrate Africa, by such scholarly comments, it begins to make you wonder why we went to school at all, why we're having these conversations at all, why we're not seeing, that we're actually the ones, dictating the pace of how things are going. Okay, first and foremost, remember, like the SSA said, the president had gone to Russia and gotten into some deals. Okay, if we had that overhang, he probably wouldn't have made that move. If you now want to tie this to the story of why we don't have a still, functional state sector in Africa, it's a story that can take the whole night if you understand it, okay? Now, there's what they call the politics of international economic relations, and that's what's playing out here now. But we're no longer the underdogs, trust me, okay? Right now, we are actually now, dictating the pace and dictating the terms of and rules of engagement. And that's for two reasons. Reason number one is that, take it or leave it, a lot of people who are outside this country are still surprised that we're still a country. Because remember that there was this, agreement that in 2015 that we're going to be imploding, okay, as a country. I remember again that there are very few countries in the world that has gone through the kind of asymmetric war we've gone, and then we are reporting growth in our economy, okay, and we're still able to do international business. We're still able to get people looking into our countries, come through our borders. I want to first and foremost say to you, you are what you think you are, not what anybody calls you. We're a great country. And our president has said, and I keep saying this, for me, there's only one major challenge we have in Nigeria. He needs to be a little bit more hard, like he said, okay? Not just on insurgency, but on corruption, right? The moment you're able to rein in corruption, trust me, my brother, there are very few. I think Ukraine, in the whole of Europe, has the largest amount of arable land, and it is just 42 million hectares of land. Do you know how much we have? 81 million pristine, unused, untouched, untapped. We have 200 million people, more than 60% of them with disposable capital. And that is why we are a market people are going to be dying to come into. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's important that in trying to create this hostility amongst Africans, there's also hostility in your house. But there's also hostility, there's also love in hostility. So we need to be able to now define what these hostilities are, where those red lines are, where we're able to now, build the synergies to be able to build a new Africa. And how do we build it? We can build it by first and foremost making certain that we become indigenous. The president, makes proud. I was listening to him this evening, and he said that one of his greatest feats was that we had become self-sufficient in rice. I remember one time in this country where over $400 billion, from the Natural Resources Fund was taken out to go and import rice and import fertilizers. We're all here. We're all living witnesses. He had gone that crazy. So for me, I think the way to look at these things is to say yes. Let me use a very crude word. They don't come again. No. Okay, but it's a good thing they have come because they don't even have any other place to go to. Trust me, what if you listened to the Prime Minister of Britain? He was like, let's work together. Okay, help me, and I'm able to help you. Let's be able to now, work for our people. Now, what that means is that Britain is no longer seeing us as a colony. If you listen to that language, they're not going to see us as partners.
True. Absolutely.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And they're not going the way of China because China is going to be wanting to chew them up. China needs to chew them up. So all these resources you're talking about that abounds in Africa, I tell you, the most critical and the most important we have, brother, everybody sitting in this studio, is our human capital. Okay? Now, the moment you are able to hone more of our human resources and capitalize it, and we're able to now develop the appropriate technologies, homegrown, that can be able to now start putting value on our natural resources, I do not see I see us actually inviting Europe to the next summit within the next 8 years in Nigeria.
Okay. Ken, give and take. Let me see post UK Brexit, say today, the next 1 year. In terms of priorities, as much as Nigeria is central to all this, and indeed Africa, do you think they will be consistent or they want to look elsewhere?
Okay, in answering that question, I think it's important for us to underscore one point. And that point is, if they do not look towards the direction of Africa, if they do not look towards the direction of Nigeria as this time, where else? Because these are people that have been in an enclave called European Union. And now, the people decided we are coming out. Brexit is here and has come to stay. And they have moved out. Now, if they move out, that means that the market share over there is also going to be shrinking, whether you like it or not. They are going to enter into a new design, a new agreement, new contracts, new line of doing things. Now, but I think that the European Union is a market that they have always engaged in, and they also know the troubles. But here is a fresh market. Look at the opportunity of the AFCFTA that's created already. 1.2 billion people. You can't look twice without looking in that direction. So a United Kingdom today is looking towards Nigeria for a direct trade and investment relationship. You know why? EU had a relationship that was burdened in the name of the Economic Partnership Agreement with Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific, 78 countries. And in Africa, we have 55 of them. And UK has moved out now. That agreement, don't forget that that agreement did not smile at the end of the day in terms of implementation. And Nigeria also pulled out to say, look, hey guys, we are not comfortable with this arrangement. And today, UK is standing alone. So what I am seeing now in terms of investment is that United Kingdom is finding an ally. We'll sit together and then tie the knots and move on. But essentially, there are things that we need and we must do. First, our preparation at home. While it is important to negotiate investments, we must all start from looking in-house. Okay. Structurizing our environment so that those investments can sit down, so that those investments will not be aborted, so that there will be no miscarriage in the consummation of those particular investments that are coming in. Number two, it's also important for us to look at sectors. Which sector do we move into at this particular time? From 70s till this moment, major chunk of investors have been eyeing the oil sector. As if there is no other resource that Nigeria has. But there are a lot of them. Can we now use opportunity to diversify our economy by picking 1, 2, 3, 4 sectors or subsectors and say, these are the areas, you are an investor, but these are the areas we want now. Number three is undertaking a very sound legal and legislative audit of our business environment. And that will also include ensuring security. Because if you do not have this in place, the investors will not take you seriously. And they may be uncomfortable here and then begin to depart. Like what happened in the previous administrations, where you have some companies, Dunlops and all of that, moving out of the shores of this country. Why? Because the investment climate was very unpredictable. It wasn't stable. It wasn't credible. And it looked at it as, look, this structure is falling down, and it cannot fall on us. Before it does, let's disappear. And many of them also escape with their funds. It will not be good for us. Therefore, we need to strategize, put in place, while we're negotiating outside, put in place all the structures, including a sound judicial system that will be able to give comfort to those inevitable disputes that must come from commercial misunderstandings. Okay. Very important.
Okay. Let's go to Kaduna, where Professor Garba is waiting to join, to give us a line of thought. Now, Professor, focus on Nigeria. Yes, Nigeria is a big market, agreed. With our resource base, we'll drive it, agreed. Now, if you want to cultivate and you don't mix the soil properly, if you cultivate, it amounts to naught. What should we do related with what Ken just said to say when all this starts happening, we are ready to accommodate and assemble?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to listen to my co-discussants. And I think before I go to your question, I think to me, I am a bit skeptical about this summit. On the side of Nigeria, I would say I hope it is not going to be business as usual, because before we, our country joined this UK-Africa summit, our president, our government was in China, they were in Japan, they were in Russia, with all these kind of summits. And sincerely speaking, among the range of opportunities listed or expected, very few are coming now. Just like the first speaker said, we are looking for a long-run benefit. Well, in as much as we look for long-run benefit, we also have to look for short-run benefit. Another reason why I am so skeptical about this UK-Africa relationship is because the UK that is incompatible with its own friends, its own neighbors, that right from the word go, when the European Union was made, the UK refused to relinquish their currency. Germany, Italy, and many of them have decided to embrace euro, but the UK refused to embrace and continue with their pound sterling. And then after some time, they now decided to quit. And they are now looking for other sources. Definitely, they know as they leave the euro, there is going to be a reduced business trade relationship between themselves and the European countries. So I think one thing we should be careful about it is that our leaders, especially African leaders, are invited and sometimes given short notices without getting ready. Just to invite them to say, President of this country, we want to see African leaders, and then you go and list some things that you want, and then sample opinions from them, and then make a decision. I think I also concur with our Minister of Finance. While she was going for this summit, she was asked that what do we have? She said, well, we are going to examine, or rather we are going to go and listen to them. If there are packages that will be of benefit to us, we accept. Otherwise, we leave. So I think the most important outcome of this is about trade and investment. Now, trade relationship between UK and African countries, we just have to be very careful because it's a question of terms of trade. What are we getting from them and what are they getting from us? What are the terms? What are the benefits? What are we likely going to have that will help us in promoting our economic growth? And we also have to consider that they may have a bit more power, more because of their productivity to produce and
take us as a dumping ground because of our large population. I think we have to be very skeptical and very careful about this kind of relationship. Now, another thing that I would say in relation to what you asked is, in what way are we going to benefit from this relationship? Certainly, I think the most part of it is through investment. If they come and invest, and they made a lot of promises, we just hope they will fulfill these promises. They made a lot of promises in relation to investment, in relation to business relationship, and so many things. But the important thing is when it comes to trade, there are a lot of things that UK can offer to us. But what are we going to offer? Like the last speaker mentioned, is it like investors are also concerned about investing in the oil sector, not investing in the agriculture and many other sectors that are also important? And now that we are in the era of diversification, I think our government has to diversify the economy, look at other sources, identify areas we have advantage, because we are going to engage in more serious trade. So we have to really look at where we have advantages, put resources there, produce as much as possible so that we can export and get the benefit in the relationship. But you see, the issue is our commodities, due to lack of adequate infrastructure, due to other problems, insecurity and other things, our commodities are the cost of production is a bit high. So by the time you export your commodities in the international market, you find that you do not have a competitive price. Many other countries can bring their commodities and sell them very cheap and at profit because of their cost of production. But here, the cost of production is a bit high. President said we are self-sufficient in rice. Yes, I think the next stage in that is to start exporting rice so that we can make dollars that can complement the petrodollars. But the question is, the rice produced in Nigeria is a bit more expensive even than the imported one. If I can give you a small example, selling 18,000 naira per bag or a little less. Now, if we want to export rice, probably the first target is to ECOWAS countries. Now, which country will accept a 50 kilogram of rice at 18,000 naira while they are buying imported rice at 7,000 or even less? I think we have to be very careful. At manufacturing side, because of high cost of energy, lack of power, and so on, production is taking place with generators and diesel. You'll find that after production, our average cost is high. Where are we going to export our textile products? Where are we going to export other manufactured products in Africa? Taking in mind that 80% of Africans are poor, they are looking for cheap commodities. So if we are not very careful, we may enter into agreement that at the end we may come and regret, because in the trade, everyone is trying to see where he has advantage and is looking for the benefits he will get. So if we are not so careful, if we do not concentrate on, like my other colleague said, on the domestic economy to ensure that the necessary infrastructure is provided, we cannot be able to compete with commodities produced outside, and as well, we may not be able to attract any investment because they may compare. When Mr. President traveled to China, among the promises is, one, we are going to convert some of our reserves into yuan, the Chinese currency, since our 70% of Nigerians are going to China to import. So it's better so that they don't lose values, converting their money into dollar in Nigeria and then going to China to convert into this. The President said we are going to convert our reserve, but up to this moment, that was not done. And then there was a promise that Chinese investors will come to Nigeria. Well, we wonder. The Europeans, the Americans, the Asians are rushing into China because of their cheap inputs to produce there. I wonder how the Chinese may find our economy conducive to come and invest here. So if care is not taken, if we do not provide the right infrastructure, we may lose the potential investors that may come, because they will look for infrastructure before they can commit their resources. We may also not be able to compete effectively in the international trade because our prices are going to be higher than the other commodities in the international market.
Thank you, Prof. Everybody's ready, but mind-boggling concerns: cost of production, cost of energy, currency swap. But that will be when we return. You can be part of the conversation by putting your calls through when our lines are open, and our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA. But we'll take these two reports from Lagos and Kaduna back to back to sustain the conversation.
Achievement of the federal government in diversifying to other key non-oil sectors to drive sustainability of the economy has helped change the narrative of the country's source of revenue to the outside world. The giant strides put in by the government through economic policies to deepen investment ties with other countries in the promotion of trade. President Muhammadu Buhari, at the recent UK-Africa Investment Summit in London, told other heads of government that the bilateral relations has further strengthened economic gains.
The President mentioned areas like oil and gas sector, the agricultural sector, obviously other sectors like the solid mineral sector, investment infrastructure are germane areas that foreign direct investors should be interested in investing in the country. Because those areas we build competitive advantage, we have strong potentials for people to maximize return if they invest in those sectors.
Nigeria as an emerging market with a nominal gross domestic product of $123.4 billion as of September 2019 and a marginal GDP growth rate of 2.28% in the third quarter of the same year. Economic analyst Johnson Chukwu agrees is an indication that the country remains a leading investment destination in Africa for both domestic and foreign investment to thrive.
In the President's speech, he did mention some of those sectors I just mentioned, agriculture, oil and gas sector, and was inviting foreign investors to come and invest in the country because these areas are of great opportunities that they can make good returns, also contribute to the development of the country.
The long trade and investment relationship between Nigeria and the United Kingdom, Johnson Chukwu believes, can facilitate more investments owing to the nation's economic performance. In Lagos, Abolade Salami, NTA News.
Let's take another report from Kaduna.
A United Kingdom that is free of its half-a-century trade and bilateral obligations to the European Union, and Nigeria, the most populous economic giant of Africa with substantially untapped potentials. President Buhari's advocacy for a broader and more inclusive trade and economic ties with the UK is viewed by analysts as the most visionary advocacy capable of reshaping the economic destinies of the Commonwealth.
Being traditional friends and partners, it will be of great benefit to the two nations. There is a possibility of producing cotton. Apart from cotton, you have cocoa and other cash crops that are not fully tapped.
Described as proactive agenda setter for a post-Brexit definitive and mutually gainful Commonwealth relationship, the President's address is equally seen as globalizing Nigeria's next-level agenda through aggressive international trade and economic linkages that would unlock the nation's untapped potential for accelerated exploration and harnessing. With specific emphasis on agriculture and mining, which are central to the administration's policy of ushering majority of unemployed Nigerians to sustainable development. A cross-section of the citizenry apply the foresight of the President, stressing that cross-border economic bridges for the ordinary enterprising Nigerian has been the long-abandoned path to prosperity.
This will actually help us to improve our farmers to cultivate a large piece of land.
What the white people know are more encouraging than us. So they have to come and join the government so they will talk about it and know what to do.
They will need to teach the farmers on how to make use of some technologies like well-equipped tractors and other things.
With a fast-growing population currently estimated at about 200 million citizens, observers believe Nigeria has seen outgrown home-based economic agenda. In Kaduna, Maijama Adamu, NTA News.
Reports before we conclude this segment and go to issues that trump up at Davos. But before we do the report, everybody seems to be on the same page, but there are a lot of buts. To our jury now, the buts of why it should not be business as usual, the concerns of cost of energy, the concerns of cost of production, the concerns of capacity, currency swap. Can you respond to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Let me just start by saying that at some point, as a country, as a people, we have to believe and understand the truth that there is no race, there is no set of people that are greater than us, that are smarter than us, that are more capable than us. We need to fundamentally, at our core, believe that. A lot of what underpins these kind of defeatist opinions about Nigeria have to do with this idea that somebody out there is superior than us and that we're perpetually inferior. I reject those notions. I know that they're false. I see our people thriving and leading sectors worldwide. In all of these countries we say are better than us. So that's the starting point. The next thing is to say that the idea that when Nigeria comes into an agreement with another country, the immediate knee-jerk reaction on the part of some individuals is to say that we're getting shortchanged. Or that we don't know what we're doing, that we're somehow the silly people at the table. These things are absolutely false. These are false notions. I think anybody who takes time to diligently study the outcomes of some of these agreements and knows the mechanisms that are being put in place to ensure the effective implementation of those agreements would know that when this President Muhammadu Buhari, is sitting across the table from another head of state, he is not sitting across the table from a vantage point of weak leverage. That is not the case. We are being pursued right now. There's an international magazine publication, well known, called Newsweek, that cited Nigeria as the next black superpower, the next China, if you will. That's for a reason. But let me get to the specifics of what the learned professor said, and I respect his opinion very much, even though I disagree quite strongly. The issue of the currency swap with China, turning some of our reserves into yuan and all of that. First of all, he said it was not done. It was done. So that's just not true. It was done. Are we happy with the benefits? I don't know that we're happy with the outcomes of that, but it was done. The next thing I will say is, because he used the Chinese example, is to be very precise in saying that just last week, during the Lunar New Year in China, the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria spoke publicly, I think here in Abuja, where he was saying that it was under President Muhammadu Buhari's administration that China has been in the process of now rebalancing the trade relationship in favor of Nigerian exports to China. He said it. We're exporting more to China now than we ever have. And now we have Chinese companies coming in to invest. And I'll be very specific of what I'm talking about. There's a Chinese company called Rongsheng that is putting together a multi-billion naira glass processing company factory in Edo State. They're also building a wagon construction factory in Kajola in Ogun State. That's rail wagons and all of that. So the idea that somehow we're not an investment destination, that we're not being taken seriously, is absolutely, it just is not true. The next thing is the idea of cost of production. This is an area where I agree with the learned professor. It is an issue. Cost of production is an issue. But I think it's important for us to delineate between goods that are in the export market. It's not everything that we put in the export market, for example, that is more expensive and globally uncompetitive. There's a reason why, for example, that we have become now one of the largest exporters and producers of cassava, right? That was not the case just 5 years ago. That is the case now. We're beginning to export goods all over the world, and they're being purchased by various countries. That means that there are certain sectors where the cost of production is not so much, affecting the rate at which we're able to sell goods. But to his point on the cost of production, Mr. President has put in place a series of policy measures to ensure that we address those things that drive up the cost of production. What are those things? First of all, you're going to be talking about infrastructure. That's railways, roadways, ports, seaports, airports, and all of that. Mr. President has been very, very clear in ensuring that with the Siemens deal with the German Export Credit Agency, that we are going to have in place a deal that is finally going to be a one-stop solution through generation, transmission, and distribution with tangible, verifiable targets and timelines that we have told the Nigerian public, so we're not hiding from those timelines. We expect that to dramatically stabilize power supply in the country and bring down the cost of production as it relates to energy. The next thing is Nigerians have seen, if across board, whether you're PDP, APC, APGA, or non-partisan, Nigerians are seeing the investments that this administration has made in infrastructure pay off. Look at Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Look at Lagos-Ibadan Railway. In 3 years, now we're already doing free rides. Look at Port Harcourt International Airport, that when Mr. President came on ground, I'm talking of the international terminal, not the domestic, was a slab of concrete on the ground. Now people are flying from Port Harcourt to Paris. If you look at Abuja International Airport, Enugu International Airport this year is coming on ground, is going to be on ground. Kano International Airport this year is coming on ground. And we're building a new seaport in Wari. Obviously, Apapa Seaport is being linked to Lagos-Ibadan Railway. All of these projects, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano Expressway, I mean, I can go down the line across the country in each geopolitical zone to talk about the way that Mr. President is opening up infrastructure lanes throughout the country. So all of that is going on. And all of that brings down the cost of logistics. The next thing I would bring out is, you know, we talk a lot about hard infrastructure in terms of power, road, rails, and all of these things to bring down the cost of production. We don't really talk enough about what President Muhammadu Buhari has done in the area of soft infrastructure. That's regulation. My brother here, Dr. Ken, made reference to reforms that he felt needed to be made. And I just want to remind all of us this evening and our viewers of the fact that it is not a coincidence that the first 2 times in our nation's history that we have been named to the top 10 most improving nations globally in the ease of doing business is in the last 3 years under President Muhammadu Buhari. And it wasn't an accident. Those were as a result of tangible reforms that I want to be very specific about. My good friend talked about judicial reform in terms of commercial cases. One of the reasons why the World Bank moved us up approximately 40 spots over the last 3 years is because of the fact that in our 2 commercial capitals, that's Kano and Lagos, we were able to make adjustments within those state high courts where new guidelines were issued to ensure that all commercial disputes, all commercial-based disputes and all of that, small claims courts and all of that, have now gone from the time of conflict resolution from about 6 months now to beneath 60 days, because now new measures have been put in place by the chief judges of those high courts to ensure that those must be expedited, those cases, and also to ensure that we have new mechanisms such as mediation and all of that to also create alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So when you look at the soft infrastructure that's been put in place, the ease with which we're now registering businesses within 24 hours now, as opposed to 3 to 6 months, even 9 months before, a lot of bribes and all of that going on before. Now we've automated those systems under this administration. So much has gone on in terms of soft and hard infrastructure to deal with the issue of cost of production. And the last thing I would just mention before I close is the issue of the finance bill, because really you cannot divorce what is happening now in terms of legislative interventions from the issue of how we're going to attract foreign direct investment and how we're going to make sure that these MOUs and agreements are implemented, because that was the concern raised by the learned professor. First of all, in the finance bill, what have we done? We have now brought predictability to the process of business administration in this country. What do you have before? You had a company income tax rate of approximately 30% that was relatively ambiguous, that was basically like a blanket covering over all of the micro, small, and medium scale and large scale enterprises in the country. What the finance bill has done is to say that, look, if you have an annual profit turnover, you're a micro or small enterprise, meaning that you have an annual profit turnover of 25 million naira or less in a year, you are exempted from company income tax. Very quickly, if you're a medium scale enterprise and that means you're generating between 25 million and 100 million naira in annual profit turnover a year, you have now seen a reduction in the rate of CIT that you're paying from 100%, from 30% to now 20%. And of course, if you're a large enterprise, you continue paying the 30%.
Let me just hold
this is the predictability we're talking about legislatively that is going to ensure that businesses and investments coming into the country know exactly what they're getting into.
Okay, so that we don't lose track of where we are headed. Ajuri has responded to a lot of issues, but there's still a lot still coming up. Now, we have looked at the issue of trade. It is a trade and investment, and trade relationship very, very critical here. As much as the initiator of this investment summit is a standalone, more or less, because of Brexit, Ken said when they come, they always want to look at one direction: oil. Nigeria's economy is already diversified. It's just that how do we channel resources has been the problem. Is it possible that when they come, we on our own can put our foot and say, no, don't go here, go here? Is that possible?
No, but again, I don't even think it's right for you to say that oil is the only thing that we're doing now. Okay, remember that the entertainment industry actually contributed much more, okay, to the GDP than even the oil sector did. Okay, the services sector too, did a lot of contribution. Now, what is important is for us to be able to probably deepen some of the thoughts of Professor, because he talked about competitiveness and he talked about cost of production. It's important again that we don't look at Nigeria from 20 years of democracy. It's important that we also now look at those things that actually created, why we lost, some of this process that we had before. And one of them is the military incursions into our body politic. Okay, because the first thing that any military incursion does is that it dilutes your democracy, it kills your constitution, and then they start ruling you with edicts. And that created a lot of command and control structures that didn't allow for people to be able to now probably do the things that they knew how to do best. The civil servants, became, you could see a soldier who was trained, as probably an armored soldier, and then he becomes a governor, and then a permanent secretary who is a seasoned civil servant now begins to say to him, I didn't even know you were this intelligencer. In fact, you know this work more than we do, because he needed to keep that job. Now, so it's important that in also talking about competitiveness, there are three things that comes to it. When you talk about cost of production, this is where you now bring in what you call subsidies. The moment you do not put subsidy, all these countries that are able to export to you at these cheap rates heavily subsidize their production, especially in the iron and steel sector and the agriculture sector. Most countries in Europe subsidizes agricultural products to close to 18%, if you may. So, but if you put subsidy on a product, it becomes price differential. Now, you're talking about competitiveness. Now, if you're talking about competitiveness, you're also talking about volume, you're also talking about inputs, and you're also talking about, like Ajuri keeps saying, okay, we have a problem with energy. Yes, I agree that we have a problem with energy, but it is not as challenging as the problem of sustainability of inputs. Okay? Now, because volume is actually where you begin to create your values. And I think that is where also the professor was trying to, take you from. Now, when people come to you, why do they come to you? I remember my brother Odien, that I mentioned something they call the politics of international economic relations. It does not always come through a negotiating table. There's what they call hostile takeover. Countries have gone to war to be able to pillage other countries' resources. All right? Now, Dr. Kem mentioned the AFTA. I was on a program one time and I said to them, for me, the moment we get AFTA, I mean, it wouldn't take 20 years for us to become the superpower. But are they going to let us have the AFTA? It's going to be a tough call. From what Macron did, by going to hijack an economy or a currency that was supposed to have been agreed, by everybody. And a small country now says, oh, we're going to be taking the euro. It's actually now, shooting a trigger to make certain that we don't come together. You see, Brexit with Britain or Brexit without Britain, Brexit is a lot of trouble. A lot of countries, the so-called big boys in Brexit are gapsing. Germany is gapsing. Okay? France is gapsing. And they are the only source of now probably getting fresh oxygen will be from Africa. Why? Because every raw material that makes them who they are actually come from us. But I'll tell you one other angle that is important to look at. You see, these so-called big countries, what do they manufacture? Most of their manufacturing are done in China, which was why it was very easy for China to have taken the position they took. First with the subprime mortgage, and then second with practically everything. Remember the toy, when they had the toy crisis? What point am I trying to get everybody to look at? It's all about productivity. It's all about production. And what is production? Production has two elements to it. The first element is skill, your skill sets. The second element is your technology. Now, both you can get through what they call reverse engineering. Hear me. We are in this studio now, about 6 cameras. Where do they come from? What are these? These are inverted mirrors. Okay, look at the names on the cameras. Now, as long as you are beginning to talk about digital camera, that camera, this camera, that camera, and NTA is not able to go to the Ministry of Science and Technology to say, you know what, take one of these cameras, put them apart, and then give us something better. This is where your productivity and then your position in the politics of international economic relations begins to matter. Trust me, 200 million people is not something you can wish away, either as a military force or as a market or as a people. More so, like I told you earlier, when we also have the most clement weather, we don't have any natural disaster. We are the biggest producers of organic products. And when you're talking about the rice we're talking about, Professor says, yes, export your rice. How can we export our rice? It's very simple. We must be able to do basmati to be able to compete with the Indians. We must be able to do perfumed rice to be able to compete with whoever. We must also now do the same rice that our neighbors eat, okay, right? So that we can be able to compete with them. It is all about technology. It's all about branding. So you can shift this game, my brother. It's not for us to wait for them to come. Mm-hmm. It is for us to take the war to them.
That's right.
Just like China did. China took a policy to say, henceforth, we are going to be producing in China and exporting to the rest of the world. And whatever it is, China has done everything that you think was impossible.
So we can as well give that direction.
Why won't you do it?
Mr. President has laid out the vision.
Why won't you do
it? Fine. Okay, now, when we return, we shall be looking at where is the private sector in all this. Now, with all these innovations and behaviors, where are we heading to regarding demand and supply behavior? Can we tailor it? But after these reports from Port Harcourt and Ibadan.
President Muhammadu Buhari's participation at the UK-Africa Investment Summit is one of his many international trips geared towards creating new partnerships that will improve investment inflows and create jobs for the teeming youths of the country. President Muhammadu Buhari is said to be focusing on key areas which include governance, market accessibility, human capital index. The devastating consequence of climate change was not left out, with Africa's gross domestic product GDP put at about 3.5% and set to rise to 4.1% in 2020. Economic watchers believe Nigeria stands a better chance to benefit from the direct foreign investment inflows arising from the partnership.
Signing such partnership pact, I believe, is going to improve on cyber security and then of all protect businesses across the country.
UK is looking for new markets, and if they exist, I know the fastest growing economy, 15 of them, out of the 15, about 8 are domiciled in Africa, and among these 8, Nigeria is one of them. If this happens, it does suggest that Nigeria has a larger market.
They however warn that direct foreign investment is a function of conducive business environment.
The moment the investors are sure that their investment are secured, be it in the form of human or material investment, then they can be very sure that, okay, we want to go invest in an environment that is good.
With 4 UK companies already signing deals with various state governments on infrastructural development, observers are of the view that the new partnership will secure lasting economic benefits for the country. In Port Harcourt, Emmanuel Lene, NTA News.
To take a perspective from a report put together in Port Harcourt.
The summit, which is a major milestone in fostering bilateral relations, is believed will bring about the desired economic growth for the country.
Having been separated from the rest of Europe, it is possible for us to be able to get them to whittle down on some of those stringent and sometimes unreasonable, requirements for imports from Africa and Nigeria. So that's one way to deal with it, because by the time you are able to reduce that, the flow of trade from Africa, or export in this case, to UK will increase. And that is good for business in Nigeria.
Being one of the top countries to secure the $6.5 billion with 4 British companies, Nigeria is expected to enjoy massive development in the areas of renewable energy, infrastructure, and technology.
That investment will improve our infrastructure. It will bring employment to Nigeria. Imagine if we have electricity, for instance, in this country. Half of the problem of unemployment will be solved. So we are looking forward to them, to do certain things for us, especially because of what Mr. President said when he got there.
The impact of the summit will have a long-term effect in creating a long-lasting partnership in the country, providing jobs for the unemployed youths. The agreement to support Nigeria in repatriating those who had done the service to the nation by the United Kingdom Prime Minister Boris Johnson is considered as a major breakthrough in line with the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration's fight against corruption in Ibadan. Yemisi Ajagun, NTA News.
Actually came in from Ibadan, not Port Harcourt. We now take the one from Port Harcourt now. Okay, the vox pop now by Nigerians on the issue.
I think the president is making effort to that regard. Nigeria is open to investment. Nigeria is open to other countries to bring in their investment and be able to. We have massive population. Having about 200 million population is no joke, and it's a huge market for any company that wants to come in. And that's our major stronghold that we can really be able to use. That's one area where we have comparative advantage that we can use to negotiate. And I think the president will definitely be focusing on those areas for the private companies to come in, for the Europeans to bring in their major conglomerate to come in and invest, and that way they can be able to get value for their money.
I really want to give kudos to Mr. President for such effort in which he has put in place. With that alone can strengthen our Nigeria economy, our nation economy, can also boost the massive employment in Nigeria. When foreign investors were able to come into the nation to invest in our economy, it helps us. It grows the economy itself, and employment can also be made massively.
Nigeria has its interest in terms of youth programs. Nigerian youths have a lot to gain in interacting. Let's start from there. In interacting with other youths, especially at the international level like that. We are Africans, and as Africans, I believe quite right that we are still developing.
We were invited, and the president of Nigeria attended that meeting. But what we are saying is this: the partnership, the synergy, his presence at that meeting has created a synergy between Nigeria and the other country on many fronts: economic front, on the military front, social front, and other areas that will be beneficial to Nigeria.
I think actually it's a good one, and it's going to create employment for the youth. It's a win-win situation for Nigeria because people will come around and invest, and it will help our economy. As you can see, people are looking for jobs everywhere, and I think it's a very good one. They should keep it up.
Those are reactions from Nigerians, and as we said, our phone lines are open, and the Twitter handle is also open at Tuesday Live NTA. From the reports, you hear so much government this, government that. Where really is the private sector? Is the private sector set to be part of this? And when all this happens, what happens to demand and supply behavior? Will it be properly tailored? Ken?
Thank you very much. Maybe the best way to start getting to that question is to underscore the fact that this administration has really drawn the private sector closer. You know, my colleague talked about the AFCFTA, which I mentioned earlier. Were not a very close and tight relationship between the government and the private sector, perhaps we would have ended up signing a wrong agreement and at the wrong time, without Nigerians knowing the contents, the implications, and our readiness or otherwise in entering the AFCFTA. So, if you look at it from that perspective, there is an increased private sector participation in terms of discussing, in terms of, harnessing synergy between non-state actors and the state actors in every investment agreement. And I'm mentioning this because the UK-Africa Summit was an investment summit. Now, our investments must therefore take a cue from what we have seen. Now, the president also came up. I think Galilei is here. He should speak about this. But the president, for the first time, came up to say Nigeria will no longer be getting into signing agreements as usual, where individuals will go out of this country without mandate and they will sign anything on behalf of the country. I remember I noted that very clearly, and I was on paragraph 11 of his speech while inaugurating the Committee on AFCFTA Impact and Readiness. And from that point, we have also seen from time to time the president and the vice president meets with the private sector and then they interact on things. But I think that we need to take it up from there and go a little much deeper. Now, if we are looking at the private sector, it also now brings a very serious responsibility on the shoulder of the private sector to reciprocate. Why am I saying this? I'm a private sector person. But I think that we do not need to be spoon-fed. We also need to collaborate, partner with government, knowing that every negotiation, every agreement, every investment is meant to be implemented by the private sector. A little more further is the fact that I think that it is time for government institutions, MDAs, to understand the role of the private sector. Why the private sector would need to pull more resources, pull more opportunities, and embrace dialogues and interactions regularly with government. But I think that there is need for proper coordination among ministries, departments, and agencies of government in ensuring that sincerely investment architecture and frameworks are implemented stricto sensu to the benefit of the people. Why did I say that? The reason why I say that is if you look at the key note for the UK Africa Investment Summit, it talks about strengthening UK's partnership in Africa, partnership with Africa. And the second stanza of it looked at boosting support for African women entrepreneurs. To do what? To expand their business into the global community. Now, how would they do that? If you look at Nigeria, almost about 61% of the MSMEs are belonging to women. And therefore, to that extent, it's important for us to look at how practically women entrepreneurs can also begin to come up with this issue of creating jobs, with this subject of expanding their tentacles. What are the impediments? What are the things that structurally impede them from exporting their markets, exporting their goods from here to UK, for instance? Yam export has been on the table. In fact, I was surprised that, some people are buying yam from here, from Ghana, come here, buy yam, and then export to European market. So what are those things that are making us not to export directly? Why is it that, Ghana will come here and buy yam, yam for 300 naira, yam for 1,000 naira, and then go and sell for over 6,000 naira for a piece of yam, a tuber of yam. So we need to look at those things. Look at issues like sanitary and phytosanitary measures that impede our market. Look at issues like export services. And I talked about MDAs. Look at, the structure of our customs administration, are they really facilitating trade, our export, or just only relying on import? There are some of my members who are on the export market. If they tell you some of the things that they're going through with their containers at the port, and I think, when we say this, it's not as if we are criticizing government, but we want government's attention. Looking at what is happening at the port, that my goods will stay for export for 27 days and is not yet moved out. If they are perishable items, what happens? The next point, maybe I would, quickly look at is that of mutual prosperity, and then the involvement of the private sector itself in the negotiations of the agreements. If you want private sector to effectively implement agreements, they must be part and parcel of that process. The mistake that previous administrations made in this country was moving into negotiations of trade without the private sector. And at the end of the day, you want the private sector to buy in and own such agreements. It's impossible. It's impossible. And I think that we need to start correcting that. Thank you very much.
Let's go to Kano now. Prof, all these demands, the creation of or the simulation of a workable synergy, we have looked at Nigeria critically. Now, this whole thing is Africa. If the African countries do not come together, pull resources together in terms of all the concerns raised to drive one common front, is it possible we can lose it as a continent?
Well, actually, we, the Africans, are in a very new era. As we have agreed on the free trade that will enhance or encourage intra-African trade, as it was. Every African country just wished to trade with European or Asian countries, but now we agreed that, okay, there should be free trade. And most recently, we are also trying to join the eco currency. I think this will further integrate Africa. But what, like another colleague is saying, we are all expecting that Nigeria should be the Chinese of Africa. Just that wherever you go, you see Nigerian products being traded, which means we are now serving the African continent, meeting their demands. However, we, like I said, still I want to apportion blame. What the British government was doing to us was not up to expectation, whether we like it or not. Though the French government tried system of assimilation, but the way the French government relates to its former colonies is much, much closer than the way the British government is relating to its former colonies. Look at how we suffered from the Boko Haram crisis. And it is now metamorphosing into Boko Haram crisis is going down, and another new dimension is coming up of kidnappings and other things. And all these are going to have bearing on our productivity, our capabilities. There are many areas in Nigeria that even agricultural production cannot take place now because of the rampant attacks, and people are being scared. So the issue of demand and supply, I think what makes us much more relevant is our large population. What I was trying to point out earlier when the SSA was bombarding me with replies, I was just trying to show my skepticism, and it is my own view that if we do not play the card very well, we may end up losing in this relationship. We know that the British government is just a sort of pressurized, or a sort of there is nothing they could do but to embrace us, because definitely the relationship between them and Europe is going to be less. And so if we do not play our card very well, we are going to lose in this relationship. But if the African countries, as we said,
come together through this, our free trade, through further integration and, using this currency in order to reduce, to bring us closer, to reduce our trade barriers and so on, so that we enhance our productivity, and then each country trying to pinpoint areas where they have advantage. I'm happy to hear from the SSA that Nigeria is growing a little bigger in exporting cassava. That means we have advantage in cassava production. So we can be able to pinpoint many other products where we have advantage, where we put less resources and produce much, so that we can effectively compete in the world market. Unless that is done, we may end up becoming a dumping ground. And again, this issue of demand and supply, I think we should also made the British government to understand that it is no longer an era where Nigeria will be exporting raw skin. We have to undertake some value chain, because we are looking for ways to employ our youth. It's no longer an era that we can export just raw granite. We have to add, we have to process it and remove so many things out of it. And I think another most important thing that I will emphasize is for us to effectively benefit from our resources, Nigerian government should try as much as possible to reduce import of refined petroleum products. Because if we export crude, we are missing the value chain. All those byproducts that are supposed to be extracted and sell in the market, we are just exporting them and we are further buying. So our population makes us much more relevant. And like I said, we should be able to pinpoint areas of advantage for us, because we are engaging in, it's just negotiating in terms of trade, because they want to start bringing in commodities and they want to buy from us. So we have to be very careful in that. And I think, again, we should also, if I should digress a bit, we should also try and motivate or influence the decisions of the British government. When they are coming to invest, let them invest in infrastructure. That is where we need more investment. Our government is going for $30 billion loan in order to fund its own infrastructural projects. So if we can have some private businesses from UK coming to invest in infrastructure, that will help, rather than taking loan, which will bound the country for a number of years. If investors come to invest and make profit out of that, I think that would be good. And then they also promise that they are going to empower women and youth. I think our most serious problem is unemployment. So if they can do that, by generating employment, they are creating more demand. If we create more demand, we are creating more market. And that will make the economy more attractive for investors to come and invest for the market. So I think we are so lucky that with the federal government campaign, now average Nigerian demands locally produced commodities. Our taste for foreign commodities has now actually reduced, whether probably because of the pressure due to poverty and lack of jobs, whether it is because of our conscience, we have changed our mind that we should buy local commodities. But I think that is a welcome development. I think we can commend the government for that. But sincerely speaking, we need to do more. And Nigerians should actually have some feelings towards our own commodities, buy our commodities, and then reduce our demand, our taste for foreign commodities. I think the demand will actually can be leveled in that respect. If we demand our products, we have domestic consumption, and then we export, I think we can end up having some surplus in our balance of trade.
For the break, we'll take a couple of tweets, then we switch to just do a sum up of our analysis on the just concluded 2020 World Economic Forum.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake Fake news. Don't create it. Don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online, or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
So stay tuned. Like we said, you can be part of the conversation. A couple of tweets came in, but quickly before we take the next issue, let me read out the tweets. Then we take the lead interview on the next issue and we discuss. The first one by Chimizere says, as far as the economy is concerned, Nigeria has three basic problems. One, power. Two, power. The government has to face it headlong. What happened to the Russia-Nigeria agreement to build solar plants in Nigeria? We are hearing nothing about it again. The power companies have refused to invest in infrastructure. The government is either doing nothing or too little to get them to do the right thing. For example, the discos are not even to distribute the little power that is being generated by the GenCos. The next one says by Ibrahim Zamfara News Media. Patriotic Nigerians must thank at M. Buhari for the economic diplomacy he has been doing, as we are confident there will be light at the end of the tunnel. More economic prosperity at UK Africa Investment Story was a success. Still from Zamfara News Media says, Nigeria is a huge market of 200 million, the China of Africa. We are now the scramble of the world economic powers. We are getting there. The last one here, there are many, but these are the few I can take. The moderator brought a pertinent issue on the interest of some of the so-called investors having their focus on the oil and gas sector of the economy. But no one has been able to dwell on that statement. Maybe when we come back, Ngalale will respond to the issue of power, while Dr. Kengu will respond to the issue of what the tweet says that I raised an issue, but no one dwelt on it. Now, the next one we shall be looking at takeaway from Davos 2020. But the lead interview by the Minister of State Petroleum, Timipre Silva, will give us a lead.
The World Economic Forum is a very major platform where world policy directions are decided. And if your country is not present in that forum, the world can move on without you. For example, the issue of climate change is a major problem, and the development of renewables. The world is now talking about moving from fossil fuels to renewables. And we in Nigeria are not ready to join that race to developing renewables. They have actually taken the discussion away from carbon emission to renewables. And we have to always bring them back to the issue of carbon emission, because climate change is more a problem of carbon emission than renewables. And for us, the transition fuel that we have in abundance is gas. So if we are going to reduce our carbon emission, the first way we can achieve that is to move from using liquid fuels to gas. So that's the platform that allows us to present our point of view, and I think the world is taking notice of that. And it's important for us to be in those kind of forum, and we were able to achieve that at the World Economic Forum. Our position is that we don't want oil prices to be too low or too high. To keep the oil prices strengthened, we have to make production cuts to modulate the market to ensure that we have strong prices, and that's what we keep doing. And next March, we are going back to review our position. We cut our production by 500,000 barrels by the last December meeting, and prices have been quite firm. But we are seeing some development in the market because of the coronavirus in China. China was where we were expecting the demand growth to come from because of the trade deal that they've been able to achieve with the US. But unfortunately, the coronavirus is a dampener. And we're beginning to see that oil prices are being impacted by the coronavirus. So we are going to go back to OPEC to review the situation and see whether we need to do further cuts or we need to keep the cuts where they are.
Was the Honourable Minister of Petroleum Resources States, Timi Silva, giving perspectives to the takeaway from the 2020 World Economic Forum that just ended in Davos, Switzerland. But quickly, before we dwell on that, from the tweets, one of the tweets dwelled much on the power sector. Can you quickly respond before we go? We don't have much time.
Yes.
Then after that, Dr. King will respond to the issue of directing the investors where to go.
Thank you very much.
Quickly.
Well, I think there are just two major developments under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari look, the power sector is one that as soon as you talk about it, Nigerians become very skeptical because they've seen billions of dollars sunk into it with no results. They've seen targets like 40,000 megawatts by 2020. We're in 2020 now. Where are we? So it's only natural for them to be skeptical when government speaks about the power sector. But I want to be very clear about the difference between what is happening now and what happened before. First of all, Nigerians now have heard about the Siemens deal. That's the Presidential Power Initiative, PPI. Now, what that entails is a series of interventions across all the value chains. That's generation, transmission, and distribution. What we had under the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo, for example, was obviously billions of dollars paid into the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, and then the Niger Delta Power Holding Company essentially engaged a whole bunch of consultants for a whole bunch of different jobs, right? Some of them were done, some of them were not done, some of them were 100% of the money collected, 20% of the work done, and all of that. But what you have under that previous arrangement was a situation where a whole bunch of consultants are bringing in goods, the actual goods from different places, right? So you don't have a kind of a synergy in terms of the infrastructure, the alignment in terms of the infrastructure. Some things are low quality, some things are medium quality, some things are high quality, and all of that. It was just very scattered. So under this Siemens deal, you have a one-stop shop where everything is of the highest quality. Everybody knows what Siemens means in terms of the power sector and what they've done in Egypt, what they've done in Iraq, and some other climes. So now we're going to have that uniformity of infrastructure, uniformity of supply that's going to ensure that you have a synergized network and architecture of the power sector moving forward. In terms of the targets, it's very, very clear, and we're open with our people about it. We are expecting that by the end of 2021, that is December 2021, that because we have the capacity right now to generate up to about, I believe it's about 12,000 megawatts in terms of generation. We have the capacity now to transmit approximately at a high of 8,000 megawatts as of now, but obviously distribution has been the weak link, modulating between 2,500 megawatts to about 3,500 megawatts. So now Mr. President has said that we obviously need to focus on the weak link first and then get into the other segments, right, so that we can get stability. If we can stabilize distribution, we can stabilize the entire sector and reduce the kinds of interventions we've had to make with these World Bank facilities and all of that. So now, very quickly, the target is by December 21, we would have brought distribution from the current 3,000 megawatts to stabilize at 7,000 megawatts, which means we'll be able to distribute all generated and transmitted power in this country. That should effectively stabilize. Now, in terms of moving forward beyond 2021, because we have the midterm target of 2021 and the 2023 target, by December 2023, we would have, with the interventions we're making with Siemens in generation and transmission and distribution will be able to generate, we're already able to generate 11,000, we'll be able to transmit 11,000 megawatts, and we'll be able to distribute 11,000 megawatts according to the Siemens roadmap. And it's important to note that that roadmap was constructed, was compiled with direct consultation with the nation's privatized distribution companies, transmission company, and of course the generation companies. So Nigerians have every reason to be confident. And we also want to mention the funding mechanism. Most Nigerians will say, what about implementation? We have so many good ideas, but how are you going to implement? And they're worried about diversion of funds because of what happened under previous administrations. We want to be very clear that the funding mechanism is different. We are working with the German Export Credit Agency, which means that now, under the agreement, 80% of the money is being paid by the German Export Credit Agency to Siemens directly, which means it's not going through any Nigerian power ministry or anything like that. It's being paid directly to the contractor from the German loanee, and then obviously 20% is that the remaining 20% is coming from direct from the Federation account under the PPI to the German Export Credit Agency. So there's no possibility of fund diversion in the power sector, and we're looking forward to that coming to fruition.
Okay.
Yes, let me speak to you very, very quickly and very directly. And I'm going to give you maybe 3 or 4 instances. One, remember that as for today, we have 200,000 cotton farmers that have been captured for cotton production. Remember, as of yesterday, the CBN had also now captured 140,000 more tomato farmers that are going to be supporting with seedlings. Remember, as of yesterday, now the palm sector, okay, I think they have injected over 100 million seedlings, to support, the palm sector. And I think it's between the CBN and 1 or 2 other things. And then last note, I'm actually involved in a project in the Ministry of Agriculture, and I can tell you with a lot of authority and confidence that by the time the Ministry of Agriculture rolls out, its new, what they call the National Agricultural Transformation Implementation Plan, there's going to be a 3-year plan. That ministry would be guaranteeing between 5 to 43 million jobs in the next 3 years. I can say that with a lot of certainty because they are both reoperationalizing, they are both synergizing, they have brought everybody who's a player, their research institutes, the operationals and everybody. So what I'm trying to tell my friend, unfortunately, I'm happy he tweeted from Zamfara. Also remember that Zamfara was a place where, at one time there was a report from the Ministry of Finance that said that over $8 billion, had been lost to gold, illegal gold production. And government is also now, focusing on the mining sector, remembering that the president had gone to Russia to go and sign a G2G on Ajokuta, getting it back to work. Now, if Ajokuta is going to work, what that technically means is that over 150 mines will get into operation. Why? Because Ajokuta needs about 7,500, 7.5 million metric tons of different materials. People think that steel is made only from iron ore. It's made from 7 different materials. Now, what that means is that you may be needing between 100 to 150 mines, for you to be able to get Ajokuta to produce the 1.1 million tons of liquid steel that you need to start taking into your rolling mill. So, when I try to answer it to say, but again, when you're talking about where you're leading your investors to, remember I mentioned that it is not every investment that is friendly. Your competitors, China, will do everything for us not to produce steel. You know why? Because we are the major off-takers of Chinese steel.
We must touch on Davos before we go.
Okay, great.
And the first shot will have to come from Kano. Let's go to Professor Shekhar. 2020 World Economic Forum has ended. As usual, you have the end result, but this time surprises came. So what's your comment regarding the outcome of the 2020 World Economic Summit in Davos?
Actually, the Davos Summit is, we can say, all-encompassing because like the theme of the summit, stakeholders for a cohesive and sustainable world. There are 2 things there. cohesiveness, countries coming together with less conflicts and so on, which will augur and promote economic growth and development, and then a sustainable world having sustainable economic growth in every aspect of life. Now, the major sub-themes discussed there, like the minister said, are things that if your country is not there when they are discussed, you are actually, the world will move without you. For instance, the issue of health futures. They talk about health worldwide. And they talk much about this coronavirus in China, which started in just one town, and within just few weeks, killing over 100 people, and then thousands, over 5,000 people getting infected. And within a short while, it is already in Germany and other countries. I think it's a very serious case. And it has started affecting even shares in Europe, the UK stock market, and many other stock markets have been affected with downfall in their shares. And then we also, it also affects even the oil market by having the prices dropping by about $3. I think it's a very serious case. They also mentioned issues to do with cancer, issues to do with other serious diseases like the issue of eye challenges, so many things. And then they also talk about this issue of technology for good, talking about this new innovation of Bitcoin, emerging technology about blockchain, where they foresee that in the future, very near future, we may not even need central banks, we may not need intermediaries, buyers and sellers will just meet directly because of the internet currency. I think that will pose a challenge. And I think they also talk about the future of work, that if this thing happens to the technology as it is rapidly moving, we may reach a point where over 1 billion people need to be reskilled. That is to say, what they are doing now will be irrelevant. They have to be retrained to do some more things to handle the machines and the other, this thing that is coming in the fourth industrial revolution. I think that is also a very serious issue discussed there. And I think the issue of climate change, like the minister pointed out, is also something very serious. The world is generating much more greenhouse gases. The global warming is becoming more and more. The seas are melting, flood everywhere, and so on and so forth, making the world, a difficult place to live. So, sincerely speaking, like the minister said, we must address the issue of, or they talk about the issue of, global warming, but considering more, or they concentrate more on green energy, sustainable and renewable energy, rather than talking about the effects of carbon dioxide emission, which is still damaging the world, and which still the major countries could not agree on taking measures to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions so that the entire world will be safe to many of us. And then the issue of fairer economics. They are talking about income inequalities, talking about poverty, talking about major issues in the world economies, having a lot of unemployment, having a lot of issues to do with access to health, access to clean water, access to education, and so on and so forth. This is a very serious issue, especially within the African continent and the other parts of Asian countries. So the Davos summit talked about that. And again, they talk about better business, talking about how businesses can be promoted, how the industries are transformed into sustainable and inclusive organizations. They spoke about a lot of side effects that affect the lives of people in the world. And then they also talk about even geopolitics, that the world is now going beyond geopolitics. They are now going further to say, though we are now saying integration is necessary, we need to integrate, we need to have ECOWAS, we need to have EU, we need to have African Union. But they are saying the world has grown faster than that. What we need now is we have to bring the world together so that we can be able to fight so many things like the issue of climate change, the issue of terrorism, the issue of global warming. These are things that cannot be done from regional bodies. So many of these have been talked. I think this is a very wide forum that if you pick any of these items, it will take you weeks discussing what are being presented there. So sincerely speaking, we can say it is an all-encompassing summit that talks about all the problems affecting affecting human development in the world.
Thank you so much, Professor Shekhar, for your contribution on the just concluded 2020 World Economics Forum. At this point, I must say thank you so much for being on Tuesday Live tonight. Professor Shekhar is of the Department of Economics, Bayero University, Kano. He joined us from our Kano studios. We're back in Abuja, Ken. Quickly, we don't have much time. What's your wrap-up on that?
Okay, I think Prof has given us an enumeration of the highlights of issues that were discussed.
In depth.
But one instructive component was, for me, the presentation made by President Donald Trump of the United States. While his impeachment saga was on there, he came to Davos and strongly marketed America First policy. And he dissected his speech and summarized with three great areas of migration and diplomacy, tax reforms, and trade protectionism, which are key to America's growth as we speak today. Would I like Trump or not is another thing. But then if you look at America today, what you see is that that has re-engineered job creation, wealth creation, as well as stability of the economy. What does that tell us here? As Nigerians, you look at these three components. I just listened a few days back, and I learned that Nigeria's foreign policy is now changing to Nigeria first. Thumbs up. But I also think that if you look at it from the three sectors that Trump is working in America, tax reforms, you look at the financial act that the president here signed a few days back. You look at the components of it and the quantum of job creation that will be arising from there. Number two is looking at migration issues, and then looking at Africa coming together, which is a policy that the present administration is also looking at. But also, the third component is on trade and investment. One key thing that is coming out, Nigeria has shut down the borders to say, look, let us get things right. Our neighbors, you must collaborate with us, partner with us, let's get things right, so that we will have shared prosperity. And Nigeria is given that leadership. And I think that this is one key area that will stabilize us in the creation of jobs. Don't forget few months before the second stanza of Mr. President's leg of political administration. One key thing that he said was that Nigeria that is going to create 100 million jobs in the next 10 years. The president is not going to stay 10 years. With this 4 years that is going to stay, if you calculate properly, you have 40 million jobs for the 4 years. Now, I want to see those sectors like my brother talked about, the key sectors in agriculture and all of these areas.
Maybe hold it there and take on. Ken, for 1 second because we don't have time.
Thank you. Davos.
Quickly. We don't have all the time.
Table of offshore.
Yes.
We stood our grounds. Kudos to the Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State. What happens in Davos is where you have people offshore, other people, where you now struggle for your space in what you call the King's Round Table. It's all about the big boys, It's actually a non-governmental meeting, if you may.
Yeah.
But what they try to do is that they make it in such a way that if you're invited to Davos, you feel privileged, to even just listen. But for the fact that...
even the amount of money.
Yes, Mr. Silver went there to say, no, if you're going to be talking about renewables, which we appreciate, climate change, which we appreciate, also know that it is not only from carbon fossils that you get this, carbon emissions. So what's happening here is that his presence, his intervention his stance he took simply means that we are beginning to get a seat, in the Committee of Nations. That's what Davos is all about. Davos is a place where you're able to now get to see the deal makers, okay, the people who wear, what you call the purple ribbons, and sit around the table. And people now, like Dr. Ken has said, Trump comes in there to say, okay, you know what, this is where America is going. Just like Mr. Silva has made me very proud as a Nigerian to say, all right, we understand where you're going to, but this is also where we're going. And people are going to now be taking him on and that. As against, this is what we want to give to you, which is what, my last word, people need to understand, that it is what you bring to the table. That's why they say, what are you bringing to the table? If you're not bringing anything to the table, you're going to be taking crumbs when they finish doing the sharing. So that's what Davos is.
Okay, let me take your perspective before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just say that, for all of the praise and all of the positive feedback that this administration has received, in terms of the agricultural sector and the reforms that we've seen reduce our food imports and obviously take us closer to self-sufficiency and ultimately global export. One of the things that I think has really been underappreciated in terms of what President Muhammadu Buhari has done is within the oil and gas sector, the reforms that have taken place, and the fact that Mr. President has the vision to now say, look, gas is the new oil. Gas is that commodity that is not going to disappear in the next 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. Europeans still need to heat their homes in the winter and all of that. How do we position ourselves? And I think it's important for us to acknowledge here that we have just closed on the deal to finance the much-awaited Ajeokuta Kaduna-Kano gas pipeline, $2.5 billion. We're expecting construction to begin in March. We are going to be building brand new power generation plants along that line in conjunction with the plan we had, the roadmap with Siemens. So you're now going to have a power generation plant in Abuja, in Kaduna, and in Kano. But the reason why it's important is the AKK pipeline is the beginning of the implementation of Mr. President's vision to ensure that we are exporting gas trans-Sahara, across the Sahara, up to North Africa, into Tunisia and other countries in North Africa. That is the President's vision, to ensure that we have an economy that is built on commodities that are going to be moving into the future, that run at a high value and a high volume. Second to the AKK pipeline, which will eventually be the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline, is the extension of the West African gas pipeline that Mr. President has worked assiduously with the Moroccan government to see its implementation. That will see that West African gas pipeline extend up into Morocco and eventually through Morocco under the ocean into Europe to be a kind of a counterbalance to Russia, because Germany and West European countries are looking at alternatives to Russia, but right now they are basically linked inextricably to Russia for gas. Now Nigeria is at the precipice of becoming the alternative to them, and that is going to be very important for our geopolitical standing in the next 20 to 50 years. And when we look back 25 years, 50 years from now, we're going to acknowledge that Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari was the beginning of the transition from the middle income country that we have been to being a global superpower economically, politically, and diplomatically. And I think that that's something we can all be excited about.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. We have earlier signed off Professor Sheka, who joined us from Kano. Ken Okowa, expert on the regional and economic integration. It was nice having you on the program tonight.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Emeka Okengu, thanks so much for making time for the program. And Ajurin Galale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Where we looked at the fallout of the UK Investment Summit and also what the perspectives ended with at the 2020 World Economic Forum that held in Davos, Switzerland. That's it on Tuesday Live tonight. Thank you so much for your tweets. We're not able to take your phone calls because of the pressure of issues to be discussed. We'll do that right next time on the program. On behalf of all of us, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.